Welcome to the Snackiecakes.com video review for Terraria.
Alright, so Terraria. What is it? Tell me about it. What is it like?
Well, sort of generally, it's a sort of survival / 2D side-scrolling action adventure game, which is, I know, kind of a lot of categories to put into one. But basically, you'll start a new character, very briefly design him, change some color schemes on his clothing and everything like that, and hop into the world with a couple of tools and an NPC called the Guide, and pretty much be left alone to explore the world of Terraria.
So, like, what other games is it like, or where does it draw similarities to?
Probably the easiest comparison, at least initially, even though it looks very different, is Minecraft, which of course is also a survival sandbox kind of a game that just drops you in the world and kind of expects you to come up with your own missions and kind of your own fun in a way. Though it is more directed. The fact that it's 2D also harkens back to something maybe like the Castlevania series, where you are doing a lot of running and jumping around and fighting other like actual mobs and sometimes even some bosses, and there's definitely more of an emphasis on combat. Another comparison to that game is that there's actually items and like rare loot drops that you'll find that certainly add a lot to your character. The only other comparison I can think of is maybe Tomba, which was a PlayStation 1 game. Also kind of depending on which one you played, Tomba 1 or Tomba 2, also kind of a side-scroller, a lot of item collection, and although it wasn't a survival game, you were exploring a world, and it has that similar kind of feeling of exploration and adventure.
Okay. So, what makes it good? What makes it worth playing?
Well, it's an expansive world. There's something to be said for being dropped into the middle of such an expansive world. Initially, you can actually run to the sides of the map. It's not something like Minecraft, which is hypothetically, I guess, infinite. But you can run to either side of the map, but it'll take you a while to get there, and you're going to run into a lot of different mobs, a lot of different biomes on your way. I mean, any number of caves that'll lead you deep into the ground, and of course you do have tools right from the get-go. You can immediately dig yourself actually a hole to hell if you wanted, which is hundreds and hundreds of feet below the surface and filled with all kinds of things. And there's that element of just, it's huge and it's fun to explore, and sometimes you don't really need to be directed. You don't really have to have an objective. You kind of just want to see what's over there, what's underneath this, what can I find, and that's sort of, I think, the main enjoyment you're going to find from the game.
Now, I know you're a big fan of really good stories and a lot of storytelling. This game, it almost seems like you're saying it lacks a story. You have to make your own missions. How does that play in? Does it lose value because it doesn't really have a solid story, or?
It definitely lacks a storyline. You could say that it is, like I said, a little bit more directed than something like Minecraft, because there are some NPCs that will join your camps. There are some bosses that you can fight that you have to do certain things to summon them into the world. And in those respects, there's almost like the quests that you have to fulfill. Okay. That said, they're by no means connected to any storyline. There's really not going to be any interaction with characters, and really no dialogue, anything like that. And so, while that is something that's lacking, I think that given the type of game that it is and the kind of experience and enjoyment that it offers, it's just really not what it's going for. If you're looking for a game that has a storyline, has characters and dialogue that you want to become involved with, Terraria is not your game. But for what it is, it does very well.
What other things do you think that it doesn't do well or is lacking?
Well, when initially thinking about that kind of a question, I thought to myself, it really doesn't do anything wrong that I could think of right offhand. For what it is, again, it's an enjoyable experience. That said, I keep saying that line, for what it is, and there's going to be people who don't enjoy the kind of game it is. And the fact of the matter, it's definitely kind of a niche game. It's not going to appeal to everybody. I don't think it was designed to do so. So although it performs well, and it doesn't really have any, say, cons that I can think of just immediately, it's definitely not going to appeal to everyone. That said, I did read a little while ago that the developer, or one of the developers of the game, said that they were not going to make it mod-friendly, which is kind of an unusual decision for the sort of game that it is, because I would certainly love to see some community-based mod content, some more bosses or whatever it may be. But I guess they're trying to restrict that, though also hoping to add their own content updates. And the game just came out this week, so it's hard to say how much they're going to stay on top of that, though there was already one patch in which they added a new item. So, if they're keeping with that sort of regularity, who knows, it could be more expansive than you think.
So now that I guess brings up the biggest question is or the biggest comparison rather is with Minecraft.
Sure.
It's obviously not a lot different in 2D versus 3D, and some would say the graphics in Minecraft are poor, whereas this is a fairly attractive game, although it's 2D.
Sure.
And you just mentioned the modding capability. Do you think those things that Terraria does differently hurts it or loans itself to the people who do enjoy Minecraft?
It's going to be a little bit of both, because in Minecraft, because it doesn't really offer those kinds of objectives. It really leaves you up to your own devices to see what you want to do in the world. I think that necessarily that sort of game draws in different kinds of people. I mean, who knows what people do when they play Minecraft? Everybody kind of comes up with their own experiences, if you will. And Terraria is more directed. There are things to do, and it's also not as infinite as Minecraft. So eventually you are going to run out of content. And of course, that also depends on how fast the developers are keeping up. But inevitably, you'll see every biome, and you'll fight every monster, and find every item, et cetera, et cetera. It took me about 35 hours to do so, which I think is a great deal for $10. But eventually, you're going to hit a wall. So in that respect, it's not as expansive. Mm-hmm. But it is more directed, and there's more combat, which is, it's simplistic, but it's really fun. It's fun jumping around and flying around with your jetpack and swinging your Miramasa, 10 times a second. It's just, there's an element there that Minecraft does not have.
Mm-hmm. So, what kind of gamer is gonna like this, and what kind of gamer is gonna just drive crazy and they're gonna put it down and never touch again?
Sure. Well, exploration is key. So any sort of gamer who really likes to explore and really take in game environments, just kind of see what they can see, feel things out for themselves, definitely going to feel right at home here. People who really like a directed experience and don't like feeling lost, if you're not a fan of games like, say, even Oblivion or something, where there's just too much to do, there's really no direction given to you. Mm-hmm. Terraria is probably not going to be your game. There's really nothing telling you, do this to win. There's no win objective or anything like that. I think also, I played the game mainly co-op, and I think that's definitely the way to play the game. You're going to have a lot more fun, I think, just running around with some of your friends, and the game well supports co-op and everything. I don't even know how many people you could have on the server, but at the moment it seems potentially limitless. So there's definitely some room for having those kinds of communal experiences as well. Single player, I think that the game would be a little bit more lackluster. Just I think there's a level of isolation and loneliness that you start to feel in a game where there's just like nothing around you and you have no objectives. So if you're really into single player, you really don't want to play with anybody else, maybe not as good of an experience for you. But again, it also depends on how much you like things like exploration and 2D combat side scrollers.